Today, we're going to learn about the water cycle. What is a water cycle? Water flows from creeks, brooks, and rivers to somewhere. Water also falls from clouds in the form of rain, snow, hail, or combinations thereof, and also shows up close to the ground in the form of dew, frost, or fog. We see that water all over the place then, but still the question remains, where does it come from? Where does it go? Well, that's where the water cycle comes in. As we can see, the water in the oceans and in land also is heated up by the sun, so it evaporates. Water changes to gas. Then it goes higher because water vapor is lighter than air until it gets to a point where it is so cold that the water condenses into droplets, very small droplets, but it becomes visible, and that's how we see the clouds. Now, water keeps coming into the clouds and keeps going up until the cloud has so much water that is too much for it to hold up there in the air. The droplets become bigger and bigger and become ice crystals, and that's how precipitation starts. Water falls to the air, probably as rain depending on the temperature, but it always starts as snow. We would like to point out that in most water cycle diagrams, it shows that only the oceans evaporate and only land receives rain. That is not the case. It evaporates in the oceans because that's where there is much more water. But if the land is wet enough, then it will evaporate from there too. Also, clouds do precipitate rain into the oceans, not just inland. Now, back to our diagram, we can see that when the clouds are saturated with water, that means they have too much water, then it starts falling off as ice crystals or as snow. Now, depending on how much warm air is below that, then it becomes rain, freezing rain, sleet, or else stays as snow. This is the real diagram where the whole water cycle, not just that of the oceans, but also the more complex water cycle in land occurs. And if you look carefully into that diagram, then you will see that there is water that precipitates inland, precipitates as snow, precipitates as rain. The rain becomes rivers, or the water falls on the trees. Part of it stays on top of the trees and evaporates again. Part of it gets to the ground and still goes underground, and it still goes further underground, where not only gets the soil moisture, gets it wet, but also goes into water structures underground that are called aquifers. And those store water there, and most of the water inland tends to stay for long periods of time. It is, unless humans, beings, get it out of it in the form of whales or other structures, then it will stay down there for quite a while. We're talking about tens of thousands of years. So the point is that there's actually very little water relatively to the amount of water that is on the earth that we actually see flowing in rivers. And yet still that's enough to provide most places with a lot of water. In other places, well, it only rains once a year, like in the deserts, or maybe once every 10 years. For more information, we send you over to the Wikipedia articles about water cycle and water cycle management. Those articles also include a vocabulary list of all the phenomena that happens on the water cycle, because believe me, it's not just evaporation, it's not just condensation, it's not just precipitation. We also have stuff like water runoff, we have like rivers, and we have aquifers, and so on. These articles will help you in defining those words and putting them in the proper context. In fact, this diagram came from that article. So, this is the water cycle for you. Have a nice day.